Welcome to another revision tutorial by MrMcMillanREvis, making revision easier. This is the fourth section in a series on Edexcel GCSE RS, Unit 3.2, Matters of Life and Death. In this video, I'm going to look at the difficult issue of euthanasia. Firstly, we'll deal with the question of what is euthanasia and what does the law say about it. Euthanasia is originally a Greek term meaning easy death. It is defined as the intentional ending of a person's life where the motivation is based on a desire to end a person's pain or suffering. Voluntary euthanasia is when a patient makes a request to have their life ended. Non-voluntary or involuntary euthanasia is when a patient does not or cannot make a request for their life to be ended. Active euthanasia is when a patient's life is ended by the administration of a lethal agent, for example, a lethal injection. Passive euthanasia is when a patient's life is ended by the removal of certain treatment, for example, not giving them food or turning off a ventilator. Assisted suicide is when a person is given the means to end their own life by a doctor. The key difference between euthanasia and assisted suicide is the question of who administers the life-ending treatment. In the case of euthanasia, it is the doctor, but in the case of assisted suicide, it is the patient themselves that administers the life-ending treatment. The legality of euthanasia around the world is an incredibly complicated and changing picture. In the vast majority of countries, helping someone to die is illegal under existing laws, and therefore both euthanasia and assisted suicide are normally outlawed. However, some countries do have laws that say while helping someone to die should remain illegal, if it is seen to be done out of compassionate motives, then anyone involved may face a more lenient sentence. Currently, euthanasia is illegal in all but a handful of countries. The most well-known exceptions are the three neighbouring European nations, Holland, Belgium and Luxembourg, which all allow euthanasia under very restricted circumstances. Furthermore, a number of other places allow assisted suicide, including Switzerland and a number of states in the USA, namely Oregon, Vermont, Washington and Montana. In the UK, the question of legalising euthanasia has been debated in Parliament a number of times in the last decade. However, as of 2013, both euthanasia and assisted suicide remain illegal under British law. In our second section, we now consider what are the moral arguments for and against euthanasia. Euthanasia is a sensitive topic because it deals with a number of important issues like life and death decisions, judgments about the quality of life, our attitude to the elderly, and the right to self-determination. Therefore, it is not surprising that a number of strongly held arguments have developed on both sides of the debate. Let's first look at the arguments in favour of legalising euthanasia. Many debates on euthanasia centre around the issue of quality of life. This phrase represents an attempt to measure or quantify the quality of life a person may have, and therefore judge whether certain medical treatment is worthwhile. If a person is in unbearable pain, either mental or physical, they may judge that they have an insufficiently low quality of life, and so they may wish to stop receiving medical treatment and end their suffering by ending their life. Medical advances now mean that some people are being kept alive when previously they would have died. However, some believe this has come at the cost of dignity. Many people now have long, protracted deaths that cause emotional suffering for the victim and their family as the patient gradually loses their independence. The British-based charity Dignity in Dying believes euthanasia or assisted suicide offers a better alternative for some people. There are some who argue that the simple economics of keeping terminally ill people alive is reason enough to consider the possibility of euthanasia. The cost of keeping people alive as they get older increases exponentially, and there is only a limited financial capability. Some argue that economic resources would be better spent on helping those who have a reasonable chance of recovery, and that spending money on the terminally ill can be a disproportionate use of money. Ultimately, for some, the question is simply a matter of choice. As human beings, we have the right to self-determination in all areas of our life, and therefore some argue that it is the human right of every person to choose the manner and the time of their own death without state interference. We now move on to look at the arguments against euthanasia. Some people argue that there are good medical reasons not to allow euthanasia. Euthanasia is normally considered for those who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness, but a doctor's diagnosis is not always 100% accurate. The person's diagnosis may not be as severe as thought, or it may be possible that a cure may be found that could save the person's life. If euthanasia were allowed, it could be possible that people would die who might have had a chance of recovery. Some argue that legalizing euthanasia would compromise the doctor-patient relationship. In particular, the elderly may feel uncomfortable in the knowledge that a doctor might recommend that they should consider euthanasia or assisted suicide. Doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, which obliges them to always act for the best, and some argue that legalizing euthanasia directly contradicts this. Some people argue that it would never be possible to be absolutely certain that a person's request for euthanasia is 100% trustworthy. People who ask for euthanasia to be performed may not be in the right state of mind to understand what they are asking for. What if they would have changed their mind? Is there any way of knowing for certain a patient's wishes? Often seen as the biggest argument against euthanasia is the slippery slope argument. This states that if we allow voluntary euthanasia in very limited circumstances, that over time it may lead to elderly people feeling pressurized into asking for it, or even family pressurizing parents or grandparents to ask for euthanasia for their own personal gain. So now we move on to the third section. What are the Christian attitudes towards euthanasia? The Catholic Church teaches that euthanasia is wrong because it goes against the principle of the sanctity of life, which states that all life is sacred and must be protected. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, "We are stewards, not owners, of the life God has entrusted to us. It is not ours to dispose of." However, the Church also says that doctors should act compassionately, and if death is imminent, it may be morally acceptable to withhold treatment which will put off death for only a short time, or to give pain relief even if it may also quicken the patient's death. Some evangelical Christians agree with the Catholic Church that euthanasia is wrong, but they go further in saying that doctors should do everything possible to extend life and should not withhold any treatment. They would argue that allowing someone to die is as bad as murder, which is against the Ten Commandments. This would be true even if a person was in a coma with little or no hope of recovery. This was the case in the Terri Schiavo story in the USA. Terri Schiavo suffered a heart attack and was diagnosed as being in a persistent vegetative state. Her doctors recommended that her life support machine be turned off, and her husband agreed, but her parents appealed and a long legal battle followed, which even included the intervention of President George W. Bush, who as an evangelical Christian argued that all attempts to keep her alive should be used. However, eventually the courts found in favour of her husband, and after the removal of her feeding tubes, she died in 2005. Some liberal Christians think that doctors should act in accordance with the wishes of the patient. God gives human beings free will, and therefore it is right that the free choices made by individual people should be respected. They would also appeal to the virtue of compassion, arguing that it is a loving thing to do to help someone end their life if they are suffering. We have no problem ending the life of an animal or pet which is suffering, so why not do the same with human beings? Thanks for watching. I've been Mr. McMillan. That's the end of part 4. For the other parts, click the links. If you have found this useful, please give this video a thumbs up and follow me on Twitter. You can also download an audio version of this video from iTunes so that you can listen to it on your MP3 device.